Okay, imagine you're a barista in Seattle. Someone walks in and asks you to make a latte, but instead of milk, they want you to pour in 53% ABV Chinese grain liquor. You'd probably call the health department before you called your manager. And if they also asked for a cilantro-flavored ice cream sundae on the side, you might just walk out entirely. But in China, that drink sold 5.42 million cups on its first day. The sundae caused an international media incident when McDonald's China actually launched it in 2022. Western outlets reported on it as a genuine cultural crisis, with commenters across social media calling it a crime against humanity. We're talking about the Mutai latte, a collaboration between Luckin coffee and Kwaichou Mutai, China's most prestigious luxury spirit. In a single 24-hour window, it generated over 100 million yuan, that's roughly $14 million, from a coffee drink, in one day. These aren't isolated weird product launches. They're symptoms of something much bigger. This is the story of how coffee, the ultimate symbol of Western middle-class sophistication, got completely hijacked, stripped of its traditional rules, and turned into something the people who invented it barely recognize. In the West, coffee is treated almost like a religion. Serious people talk about soil chemistry, altitude, light roasts, and the exact seconds of water extraction. Getting a genuinely good cup is a slow, deliberate, almost spiritual process. A proper specialty latte takes 10 minutes to make and costs $7 or $8. The barista probably has strong opinions about your bean origin choices and will tell you about them whether you asked or not. In China, that same coffee drink costs $1.50, gets dispensed from an automated machine in 30 seconds, and might be blended with coconut milk, palm sugar, fresh fruit juice, or a luxury grain spirit that normally goes for $400 a bottle. On paper, this looks like a simple culture clash. In reality, it's something far more interesting. Two societies that arrived at completely different relationships with the same beverage, for reasons that have almost nothing to do with personal taste and almost everything to do with history, urban density, and the daily economics of staying awake. Here's the thing about American coffee culture. It took generations to build. The story starts as a political act during the Boston Tea Party of 1773, when colonists abandoned British tea for coffee as a statement of national identity. Then came a century of industrial commodification, with brands like Folgers perfecting vacuum packaging and making coffee a cheap, consistent household staple. Then came the rebellion against that industrial sludge. In 1966, a Dutch immigrant named Alfred Peet opened Peet's Coffee in Berkeley, introducing Americans to rich, high-quality dark roasts. Peet's own apprentices went on to found Starbucks in Seattle in 1971. 3 decades of Starbucks later, the Italian espresso bar had been transformed into a mainstream middle-class social institution. By the time third-wave boutique roasters like Blue Bottle arrived in the early 2000s, the Western consumer had spent generations slowly learning to sit with bitterness, appreciate acidity, and find meaning in the raw complexity of a single bean. China skipped every single one of those developmental stages, all of them, at once. In 1989, Nestlé introduced its 1+2 instant coffee to the Chinese market, a pre-mixed packet of instant coffee, non-dairy creamer, and sugar. Pure black coffee tasted like bitter medicine to a population that had been drinking tea for thousands of years. Nestlé's fix was brutally practical. Drown the bitterness in sweetness, keep the price low, make it portable. It became the default caffeine delivery system for China's first generation of modern office workers, people who needed the stimulant effect, not the sensory experience. Then Starbucks opened its first mainland store in Beijing in 1999. China's GDP per capita at the time was under $1,000. A Starbucks latte cost around $4, making it a genuine luxury purchase. And it sold, not because the coffee was exceptional, but because of what carrying that paper cup with the green mermaid logo meant socially. For a rapidly rising professional class, it was a visible badge of international aspiration. You weren't just drinking coffee, you were performing a version of the modern, globalized life you were building for yourself. The result was a market that went directly from instant powder sachets to premium lifestyle cafes in under a decade, skipping the entire slow generational process of learning to actually appreciate the beverage itself. For most Chinese consumers, coffee was either a functional caffeine shot or a social status prop. There was no deep historical reverence for the bean, no attachment to bitterness, no heritage to protect. Just a blank slate. And that blank slate became the foundation for one of the most aggressive commercial reinventions in food and beverage history. For nearly 20 years, Starbucks dominated China on one core concept: the third space. The idea is that a cafe isn't just where you get coffee. It's a premium physical environment between home and the office. You pay not for the liquid in the cup, but for the right to occupy a leather sofa, use the Wi-Fi, and absorb the prestige of the environment. In a crowded, expensive Chinese city where private space is genuinely scarce, this was a powerful value proposition. Space itself was the product. Then in late 2017, a Chinese startup called Luckin Coffee asked one simple, brutal question. If someone is buying coffee primarily for caffeine, why should they pay a 400% markup to subsidize a stranger's comfortable chair? Luckin's answer was total operational ruthlessness. Forget 200 square meter flagship cafes with premium rent. Build tiny 40 square meter pickup shops in cheap, high-traffic locations. Eliminate physical menus and cash registers entirely. Force every single order through the smartphone app, giving headquarters real-time data on every customer, full automation of supply chains, and almost zero labor redundancy. Luckin called this the OMO model, online merge offline. It wasn't a discount version of Starbucks. It was a completely different theory of what a coffee business is supposed to be. In April 2020, the whole thing appeared to implode. Luckin confessed to fabricating 2.2 billion yuan, roughly $310 million, in sales. Stock collapsed. Nasdaq delisted them. The founders were publicly ousted in a brutal restructuring. Western financial media declared the company dead and moved on to the next scandal, except Luckin didn't die. New management paid the SEC penalties, restructured the debt, and quietly kept building stores. By Q1 2026, Luckin had 33,419 locations across China. That is not a comeback story. That is proof that the underlying model was so correctly engineered for its market that it survived a scandal which would have permanently destroyed any Western equivalent. Then the story got genuinely bizarre. The disgraced founders launched Cotti Coffee in October 2022. Same model, different name. Tiny pickup locations, app-only ordering. Pricing so aggressive it made Luckin look expensive. By early 2026, Cotti had expanded to over 14,300 locations across 28 countries, opening an average of 13 new stores every single day. The same founders, the same playbook. A second empire in under 4 years after a very public disgrace. This proved one thing definitively. The app plus pickup format wasn't a clever brand strategy. It was simply the minimum operational efficiency required to exist in a high-density urban market. You run at that speed, or you lose. Starbucks absorbed these lessons slowly and expensively. In 2025, they sold a 60% stake in their Chinese operations to Baijiu Capital for $4 billion. 25 years of solo ownership in China ended by the inability to match local speed and local scale. With the infrastructure war largely decided, the next battlefield became the cup itself. And this is where Chinese brands made their most genuinely creative leap. The mass market consumer never embraced the sharp bitterness of traditional Western espresso. Standard dairy milk can actually make that bitterness worse. But cold-pressed coconut milk turned out to be close to a perfect solution. Its natural sugars and fats neutralize espresso's harsh edges while adding a smooth, subtly sweet finish. The raw coconut latte became an overnight permanent bestseller, not because of a massive marketing budget, because it genuinely tasted better to an audience that never wanted bitter coffee in the first place. It rewrote the default category for the entire industry. But flavor innovation is only half the story. The real weapon is what Chinese marketers call industrialized clout, using coffee as a vehicle for manufactured cultural status at scale. When Luckin partnered with Guizhou Mutai, they weren't making a culinary decision. Mutai retails at $400 or more per bottle. It's the drink of billionaires, government banquets, and high-stakes business negotiations. By adding a fraction of Mutai flavoring to a $3 latte, Luckin sold young office workers a psychological taste of elite status at a price point anyone can afford. It's not a beverage. It's a social media event dressed up as a menu item. This game is viciously fast and completely unforgiving. In late August 2023, premium chain Manor Coffee launched a collaboration with Jim Beam Bourbon. Whiskey lattes, 100,000 limited edition custom glasses, a full campaign rollout. Launched August 30th. 5 days later, Luckin dropped the Mutai latte. Every news cycle, every social feed, every group chat in the country got instantly swallowed by Mutai hype. Manor's entire campaign disappeared without a trace. When coffee is a form of social currency, you're not competing on quality or taste at all. You're fighting a winner-take-all war for public attention in a news cycle measured in days, not weeks. While China races prices toward the floor, regional chains now sell fresh ground Americanos for under $1 in lower-tier cities. American coffee is racing hard toward the ceiling. A standard specialty latte in a suburban US cafe now runs $7.28, and then comes what consumers have started calling tip creep. Payment tablets at self-service counters, prompting 18%, 20%, even 22% tips for someone simply handing you a paper cup across a counter. The daily caffeine run has quietly become a real financial decision for working-class Americans who make it 5 days a week. The deep irony is that Americans aren't actually drinking traditional coffee anymore either. Starbucks' own financial reports show that 75% of US beverage sales now come from cold iced drinks, heavily customized, loaded with flavored syrups, caramel drizzle, and sweet cold foam. It's essentially a caffeine-infused dessert that happens to contain espresso somewhere at the bottom. So both cultures have rejected traditional espresso. China turned it into fruit tea, America turned it into a milkshake, and both markets killed the sit-down cafe through different tools. China did it with app-only pickup shops and delivery scooters. America did it with the drive-thru. Dutch Bros built its entire national expansion on double drive-thru lanes and zero seating. You never leave your car. You receive your customized sugar drink through a window and drive away. Here's what genuinely nobody predicted. After years of diverging in completely opposite directions, both models are quietly borrowing from each other's playbook. In February 2026, Luckin opened a 2-story, 420-square-meter Origin flagship in Shenzhen. LEED Platinum certified, single origin pour-overs, professional espresso machines, a designated space for coffee education events, and professional tastings. The company that built its entire empire on cheap, fast, automated takeaway is now constructing exactly what Starbucks built 15 years ago. Because once you own the mass market at scale, you need people to actually respect your brand, not just use it as a utility. Starbucks, meanwhile, is opening smaller footprint cafes in America and rapidly expanding suburban drive-thrus, while deploying express kiosks in China to compete on the speed that local brands established as the baseline. And in July 2025, Luckin launched soft openings in Midtown Manhattan and Greenwich Village, often taking over the exact spaces where Starbucks had just shut down. Coconut lattes, app-only ordering, specialty-grade coffee at half the going price, aimed directly at Gen Z Americans who've quietly done the math on an $8 drink plus a 22% tip and decided it doesn't add up 5 days a week anymore. The cup in your hand has always been a mirror. It reflects how your city is built, how densely you live, how fast your workday moves, and what you can realistically justify spending on a Tuesday morning. One culture spent 2 centuries slowly learning to worship the complexity of a single bean. The other spent 2 decades learning to use that bean as a platform for something else entirely. Now both are quietly building what the other figured out first. So, how do you take yours?